Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us at the MarketSite studio, we have Steve Schoffstall. He's the Director of ETF Product Management over at Sprott to discuss the energy transition and ETFs that can get you exposure to it. Steve, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Great to be here. Thank you.
And let's talk about this global investment in the energy transition. These are some pretty big numbers that we're looking at.
There are. We're seeing a lot of investment on a global scale coming to the energy transition space. Last year, estimates from Bloomberg show about $1.1 trillion into the space. That covers not only renewables and EVs and electrifying the grid, but really the whole gamut of building out the infrastructure. That's a significant number because not only is it a 31% increase from what we've seen last year, we're starting to see acceleration in the rate of investment, but it's actually on par with what we're seeing on fossil fuels. So we don't expect fossil fuels to go away completely. We expect them to be here for decades to come, but it's interesting to start to see the transition come into full force.
And when you look at the supply-demand scenario, there are some interesting investment opportunities.
There are. So there's a couple ways to look at that. If you look at the supply side, being that you do have to have mining in order to have an energy transition, there are many considerations you have to take into account there. First being, anytime you go to get a large-scale mine up and running, a greenfield mine, could take 7 to 10 years or even longer. So there's this stopgap that we have there that really limits how quickly we can start mining these materials. When you shift over to the demand side, we don't necessarily see it a lot here in the US because most of the investment is international at this point, but the growth of EVs is really starting to cause a strain, particularly for the core battery metals when you think about lithium, nickel, cobalt. And lithium in particular, you're starting to see automakers like GM invest hundreds of millions of dollars to try to secure that pipeline of assets that they need in order to get the batteries manufactured.
What type of companies would you look for then?
So we typically focus on pure play companies that are upstream in the supply chain. We think those companies that are bringing the metals to market are well positioned to benefit from any increases in demand and price that we might be seeing. And typically when we think about those companies, we really put them into 3 separate categories. We have minerals that, miners of minerals around the generation of energy transition materials. So that would be things like uranium, silver, and rare earths. When we talk about transmission, we're thinking of things like copper, which really does stretch across all aspects of anything that requires electricity. Copper's involved. And then finally, when we look at the storage aspect of it, most people are familiar with lithium, cobalt, and nickel. That makes up about 23% of the weight of an EV battery. When you start adding graphite and manganese and those companies that are mining those, we start getting closer to 55 to 60%. So we think there's a lot of opportunity on that upstream side.
So tell us about the Sprott ETFs and how investors can get exposure to this theme.
Sure. So we recently listed on Nasdaq 4 ETFs. We have the Sprott Energy Transition Materials ETF, ticker SETM. We have the Sprott Lithium Miners ETF, ticker LITP, which is great for someone looking for that targeted exposure. And then we have 2 junior miners funds that we recently launched, the Sprott Junior Uranium Miners ETF, ticker URNJ, and also the Sprott Junior Copper Miners Fund, ticker COPJ.
Where would this fit in an investor's portfolio?
There's several buckets it could fit in, so anywhere that you have thematic exposure, we do very much consider this a thematic play. We do have clients that are interested in the commodities side, and while we focus on the energy transition, particularly when it comes to battery metals, there is still a large use on the technology side. So any phone or anything that requires storage of battery materials, there's also a spot in technology as well.
All right, appreciate the insight, Steve. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.